All right, everybody. So, welcome to our September virtual lunch and learn. I'm really excited today because we have four amazing judges, one from each county here, joining us today. So, I'm going to kind of get started with some introductions. So, if it's okay, I'm going to kind of go Judge Haskins, Judge Jones, Judge Vari, Judge Much, because that's how you all show up on my screen here. But if you could take time to introduce yourself, who you are, what county you serve, how long you've been on the bench, and kind of what you did before becoming a judge. So, Judge Haskins, we'll start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Judge Natalie Haskins. I sit in Newcastle County Family Court. It will be 10 years this December. Prior to becoming a judge, I was a public defender. Most of my clients were juveniles accused of very serious offenses. Prior to that, I was a child advocate. That was brief. I was in Kenton, Sussex County. And then prior to that, I was a prosecutor. And before that, I worked at a law firm doing really boring corporate stuff. Quickly realized that wasn't for me right out of law school. They paid me well, but it wasn't, I just didn't feel like I was helping anyone who I wanted to help. So I made the switch to public service, haven't looked back since. Was that it, Lauren? Was something else I was
Yeah,
missing?
I think that was great. Thank
Well,
you.
I'm a Delaware native too. I went to Newark High School in Delaware undergrad. So, yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Judge Jones, can you answer those same questions? Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Peter Jones. I'm a family court judge in Georgetown in Sussex County. I just completed my 27th year on the bench. And before coming on the bench, which people remind me was in the last century, I was a private attorney in a small law firm in Georgetown, handling a variety of different things, anywhere from some family court work, criminal defense work, real estate settlements. I represented the town of Georgetown. I represented Sussex County, so I did a variety of things. And I actually, after law school, I started off my career for a year or two as a criminal prosecutor. And I grew up actually in Wilmington and graduated from Mount Pleasant High School.
Awesome. Another Delaware native. I love it. Judge Barry, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely, and thank you for inviting me today. Another Delaware native from Kent County. I did live in Wilmington after undergraduate at University of Delaware between that and law school, but then came back to Kent County when I finished law school at Widener. I've been back at family court, I'll say, for about 19 years, about 10 of it as a judge, about 9 years before that as a commissioner in Kent. Before that, I started out in a small general practice firm in Dover, was there about 5 or 6 years. Then I went to the Delaware Department of Justice, but I had no criminal experience, unlike Judge Jones and Judge Haskins, no experience with a criminal setting before, even when I was at Justice. Instead, I did a brief stint prosecuting DFS cases. I did some professional licensing board work, helping board of psychology examiners, that type of thing. But I spent most of my time at Justice representing the State Board of Education and the Department of Education, and then came to family court as a commissioner in '07. In terms of personal stuff, I have a big interest in education of kids with disabilities because I have an adult son with pretty significant disabilities. And I am also a Delaware native, downstate.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you. And then Judge Much, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, I'm also a Delaware native, Wilmington, born and raised, and I have been a judge for about 18 years. I was a commissioner for 8 years, I'm sorry, not 18, and a commissioner for about 17 years. I worked at the Office of Disciplinary Counsel for a 7-year stint in the middle of all that, prosecuting lawyers who didn't do the right thing. And I have only been doing DFS though for about 5 years. And prior to that, I was a prosecutor with the Department of Justice, working in the family unit at that point. And before I became a lawyer, I was a travel agent, a waitress, a unit clerk. I did just about anything to not go to law school, but then I just decided to bite the bullet and go to law school, and here I am. So,
Wonderful. Well, that is awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of you introducing yourselves. And it's always interesting to hear kind of what happened before you became a judge. So Judge Haskins, I'll kind of start back with you. What do you find that might be difficult about presiding over dependency neglect cases in your time, kind of, serving in those specific cases? What do you find challenging, Judge, starting with Judge Haskins?
Sure. What I have found as a former defense lawyer challenging is when I see what I think is inadequate advocacy for the parents. It's very difficult to balance the line between just being a neutral, impartial, hearing officer, and then seeing some attorneys not, I think, really like coming forward and giving me a case, like, presenting evidence and questioning witnesses and doing the kind of advocacy I would do. That's really been difficult. And so it's hard because we are allowed to ask questions, but I have to not hijack the questions from the lawyers. So when I first started, I did that a lot more. And now I kind of write my questions on the side and wait, a little bit more patient. So I think just seeing, parents, like when you have your child in care, your rights as a parent, like having your child live with you is a right given to you by the Constitution. It's fundamental right. And when it's not protected, like we do in criminal cases, it's hard to watch. So that's been probably the most challenging, aside from the subject matter, which I kind of knew I was getting into that kind of trauma work. But to me, it's watching lawyers not do a good job. I will say we have new attorneys who have come on board lately. And I don't know if any of you have noticed, there's been a tremendous uptick to me in the advocacy level of the attorneys in our county and in front of us, and I really like that. So I like when an attorney gives me a good argument as to why a child should be returned to the parent or whatever. So just seeing better lawyers on all sides makes the process more fair.
Wonderful. Thank you. Judge Jones, how about you?
Yeah, well, I think it's difficult handling cases with this subject matter. Since I've done so many of these over 27 years, I know how the case is going to proceed. I know that there's going to be an effort in most cases to reunify children with the parents, but I also know that if we get to the end of the year and there hasn't been reunification, then I'm the guy who's going to have to start making some very hard decisions. And so, and decisions that are going to immensely impact the lives of the people in front of me, whether it's the parents or the children who may never be going home to their parents. It's also, I think, difficult presiding over these cases when we're involved with kids who are languishing in foster care because the parents didn't do what they were supposed to do or were not able to do what they were supposed to do to get reunification. And now we have a child who's in foster care, and we come back every 90 days or every 6 months, however long, to see how that child is doing, living at Murphy School, hopefully living in a foster home. A lot of times they're not in a foster home, they're in some type of facility, and recognizing that that's the child's life now. We're not very successful in finding a permanent placement for that child, and the child is just languishing. And I hate to think what's going to happen when that child turns 18 and ages out. But actually, I do know that in a lot of cases, the child's going to have a very difficult life as an adult. So I think those are the difficult things I find about these cases.
All right, thank you. Judge Barry, how about you?
So I once heard something that resonated with me. I heard a speaker describe termination of rights proceedings, which many of us is the natural result of the dependency proceedings often. But I heard an attorney describe that as the death penalty from a parental rights perspective. And I think that's an important concept. These are incredibly serious cases. And I think the biggest challenge for me, I believe that makes them even more emotional than the other types of work the court does. And I think the big challenge for me is I'm trying to consistently set a tone where I get the law right, I get the facts as good as I can get them, but that we also treat everyone with compassion and dignity and respect. And it is easy to lose that when we hear about the often terrible things that happen to kids. Like Judge Jones says, when we know that many times, no matter what we all do, we're not going to have a good outcome, it is easy to become very judgmental and harsh. And I know I personally struggle against that to try to bring the right tone to the hearings. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. And how about you, Judge Much?
So what I struggle with, that I find most difficult, I think, is with the older children that go into care, where the parents have I don't want to say given up, but they've struggled so much with these kids, and they finally say, I can't do it anymore. And that just makes me, that's, I think, very emotional for me. I really struggle with that because I've had children go into care and then go AWOL. So I try to tell parents that you think that you're doing the right thing by your child by giving them to DFS, but you have to remember that the best chance your child has is to be with family. That's how they're going to thrive and prosper. And if the family needs help, I think at that point, I feel like if we haven't been able to give the family enough services to be able to keep them together such that the parents say, that's it, I don't want this child anymore. And I try to tell them it's not going to get any better with your child in state custody. So those are the cases I find most challenging.
Okay, awesome. So I didn't mean to start out negative. Now I'm going to flip it to the positive side. Going back to you, Judge Haskins, what do you find most enjoyable about presiding over dependency neglect cases?
I love talking to the youth on my caseload. So whenever I have them in court, I try to welcome them. I give them a chance to speak. I give them a chance to correct the record. I invite children of all ages to come. I think it's important even though we get into some heavy things with parents, and there's times maybe when a mom or dad wants to say something that happened in their childhood that they don't want their kid to have to hear. That's rare. But for the most part, I feel like the children benefit from hearing it firsthand. Because sometimes we're at a crossroads, like Judge Much said, with a teenager, and the teen thinks I'm the one preventing them from going back. I'm not. Their parent doesn't want them back. And so sometimes parents talk to the teens outside of court and say one thing, and a worker is telling the teen, but for everyone to be in the courtroom together, I think it empowers the teen to hear it in real time. I feel like children benefit from honesty. We think we are protecting them. They already know. I mean, 10-year-olds know, 12-year-olds know. So I think the more they know, I'm a big believer in trying things out too. So I'd like the kid to try to go to a relative or try to go to this family member while you're still under 18. Because if it doesn't work, we can help you get somewhere else. As opposed to keeping them from their family and then they turn 18, like Judge Jones said, and they're having a really bad outcome. They're in a shelter. So I love the teenagers. I have my own teenagers. Sometimes I like those kids more than my own teenagers. But I think the ability to affect a child's life and interact and advocate for them, because when I'm on that bench, I'm asking questions of everybody as if it was my own child. I had a worker one time say, this kid's doing well in school. I saw the grades. They were C's and D's. And I asked the worker, if that was your child, would you describe these grades as good grades? No. So what is going on? Do they need a tutor? Do they need extra support? So I'm asking the questions I would ask if they were my own children and try to make sure they're getting everything that my kids would get or I would ask for. So the joy of this job to me is like my kids say, Mom, you're like a kid superhero. Like I really consider my job to protect children in whatever capacity that kind of looks like.
Awesome. Thank you. Same question to you, Judge Jones. What's most enjoyable?
Well, I would have to say in those cases where I'm able to determine that a child can safely be returned to the care of the parents, that's an enjoyable thing. But I want to latch on to something that Judge Haskins said about kids coming to court. We've been talking about this for most of my career, kids coming in the courtroom. And if I've been at national conferences and hear judges from other states, and there's still in many states is this feeling that, why would you want to bring a child into courtroom? Why do you want to expose them to that? We need to protect them from that information. And actually, I was part of a group. Well, it's the family court judges in Sussex County who presented sometime earlier this year, I think, to the DFS workers in Sussex County, and I made that same statement. Kids, we want kids in court. You know, they know about this. It's their life. Why not have them come to hearings? And boy, the resistance I got from the room on that. But I think that is so important. And I'm not saying they have to be present for everything that's said in the courtroom at all times. We can move them out of the courtroom or put them in the Zoom waiting room if we don't want them to listen to something. But I know it's beneficial to me to talk to the kids, and I think they have the right to see what's going on. And you never know what information you might get from that child by having them participate in the hearings.
And can I just add on, Lauren, Judge Jones taught me something. I'm not sure I ever told him this. He told me that he likes to see a picture of the youth, and he staples it on his folder. So I started doing that, not necessarily on my folder, but I always say, can I please see a picture? Can someone show me a picture? That's a real little human, because the younger kids, if they're one, they're not coming to court, but they're still a little human. And I want to see this person whose life I'm deciding. So thank you for that, Judge Jones.
Okay, good.
Can I ask as a sidebar question is who generally provides that photo to you?
Whoever
Yes.
DFS or the foster parent, if they're in the room, they'll come show me on their phone, or the parent may show me. It doesn't matter to me who has the picture.
Okay. I'm thinking that's something a CASA could do as sort of an action item is, hey, can we just make sure that the judge has a copy of a photo of the child if possible, whether it's from the CASA themselves or from foster parent or DFS. Okay.
And I don't put those into evidence. They are in the file. So every time I have that file, I see the picture of the children. I don't have to open up an evidence folder.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Judge Vari, what's most enjoyable to you?
So ditto on everything Judge Jones and Judge Haskins just said, and I think the court's actually beginning a push to really involve particularly older youth more in proceedings. And I think that leads me to what's most enjoyable. I think those moments where everyone is present can lead to great healing opportunities. We discount, and one of the things that's really enjoyable to me, healing can actually be through a termination proceeding. I've seen remarkable hearings where parents have consented to the termination and say, I know the foster resource parents can provide more for my child than me. That's healing, right? Other types of healing as well. That's what's most enjoyable for me. And I think watching everyone else in the courtroom, it's something they find satisfactory as well. I don't think most of us get into this because we want to be mean to people. I think we get into it for real human interactions.
Awesome. And then Judge Much, what's enjoyable to you?
I think the most enjoyable part about doing any of this dependency neglect work is the extended jurisdiction when children actually have some of the children, I can't say it for all of the kids, but they actually mature and they're just taking control of their lives, which I just never thought possible in some of these cases that I've had. So when I've got these women out there telling me that they're enrolled at Dell State and they're doing this and that and they're due to graduate, and it's just I think it's just amazing the effort that everyone is putting in. And I have CASAs stay with these children through extended jurisdiction. I've had people appear with the kids, and it's just an amazing thing to watch kids succeed.
Wonderful. So now I'm going to kind of really focus on CASAs. And CASAs listening, I've asked the four judges, I have some kind of scripted questions, but then hopefully we'll have time, I can kind of open it up a little bit. But I want to kind of focus on the role of a CASA. So Judge Haskins, how do you view the role of a CASA when working a dependency case? And kind of, I'm going to add the second question is, what are some things that a CASA can do during a court hearing that can best assist you?
I would kind of say, I think CASAs help me outside the courtroom. So I want my CASA to be looking out for the best interest of the child. And that would include not just going to the foster home and talking with the foster parent, but talking to the parent. I see a lot of times foster parents, and they some of them had big houses and they can provide a lot for the youth, but I'm not comparing foster parent to bio parent. I think the CASA's role is to really give me their best recommendation after talking with the parent, relatives, and the foster parent. Does that make sense? I feel like sometimes in my earlier days, some of the CASAs I had would be very in line with DFS, and to me had not met with the parent, had not talked to the parent. But more recently, some of the CASAs I've had have been very, I can tell they're not just rubber stamping DFS, they're doing their own investigation, they're going to schools, they're looking at report cards. So I think, and I've had some CASAs highlight things that were inconsistent in what the worker said. So that CASA is telling the child attorney, and they're able to question the worker and show me the worker didn't do certain things. The worker didn't get the tutor, or the worker didn't connect the youth with whatever they needed. And so I'm looking for that. I'm looking for, because I was a child advocate, I'm looking for the kind of CASA that's going to be willing to stand up to, DFS supervisors and all that, and say, no, this is what's best for this kid. Also, meeting with the youth, getting to know them so the youth trust you and opens up to you, and that takes time. These youth have been through a lot, and so they're not just going to first meeting open up to you. It's going to take consistency. I've had some cases I've had for 8 years. The most consistent people are me and the CASA. We've had different child attorneys. We've had different DAGs. We've had different parent attorneys. The parent attorneys are gone. But it's like me and that CASA and my bailiff are the most consistent people in this youth's life. And so take that job seriously, take your role seriously, show up to court. I try to give time for CASAs to testify whenever I can. So I want to thank you all for volunteering to do this kind of work. It's not easy work, but we really do need you, because you have the child's best interests and not an agency's in terms of why you're there. So that's what I would ask for.
Awesome. Judge Jones, same kind of 2 questions to you is, how do you view the role of a CASA when working dependency neglect cases? And then how can they best help you either in or out of court?
Advocate on behalf of the children and be knowledgeable about what's going on in the case, and be able to express that information, testify if called in the courtroom. What Judge Haskins was referring to, the foster parents, yeah, foster parents probably are always going to have a better house. They're going to have qualifications better than the foster parents, but that's not why we're there. We're happy the foster parents are able to care for the kids in that way, but we're trying to in most cases, get the kids home to their parents. I had a case somewhat recently where the CASA was testifying, and the CASA was referring to the foster parents, and there was more than one in this case, by their first names, and wasn't referring to the parents by their first names. And that struck me, because I sometimes it's very easy for the CASAs to become closer to the foster parents than they are to the parents, and so that struck me as some. I didn't like that. I'll just say we have to be professional here. And then I wondered how close that CASA had become to the foster parents in the case. How much time was the CASA actually spending with the parents? Those are my comments.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of dynamic between foster parents and foster parents and biological parents. Judge Vari, same question, 2 kind of double questions to you is, how can a CASA best assist you in and out of the courtroom? And then how do you view the role of a CASA?
So I think the role spelled out in the name. You're an advocate for the children. And that is what I expect you to do. And I think that requires all the things Judge Haskins and Judge Jones already talked about. You got to inform yourself. You got to talk to just not the people that it's easy to talk to, but the ones you really don't want to talk to, so that you can bring to the court a good exploration of all of that. Because each role in the dependency proceedings has its own, I'm going to call them axe to grind. They have their own interest. And what I see as the special part of being a court-appointed special advocate is 2 parts, is that you are independent from all of those other agencies, but also, while many of you bring specialized knowledge or training about kids and families to the proceedings, what I really value primarily is that you have real world life perspective on things. so that it's not simply what I think it ought to be, but it's real life for the children. And so I've had CASAs come to me and say, I know everybody else is really worried about the fact that the child missed 3 counseling appointments, but what he really wants is cleats to pay football. That is a huge help to me. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Judge Much, same question to you about the role of the CASA for you.
Okay, so I consider the CASA the voice of the child. So I really, really, whether the child's an infant, whether the child's like 2 months old, or whether the child's 16 years old. And so to me, I think it's just so important for the CASA to try to develop as much as they can a relationship with the child and that child's community. So like everyone else has discussed, understanding about the child's schooling and activities, et cetera. And I just wanted to relate an instance that I had with an exceptional CASA who fought tooth and nail to have a child removed from a foster placement based on the inadequacies of that placement, where DFS had blinders on, and they were just couldn't just get by what they believed was an appropriate placement. And we finally were able to get the child out of that foster placement, and the child's in a foster resource to adoption at this point. And so it's we really value your eyes and your ears on behalf of this child, because to me, you are the impartial person coming into my courtroom to be able to just fill in the gaps in what I'm hearing. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. So judges, I'm going to ask one more question, and then CASAs, I'm going to turn it over to everybody, to all of you to ask questions. And some people are using the chat. So actually, that's probably the best way to do it, is if you have a question, we're going to have CASAs kind of type them in the chat, and I'll go through them after I finish my last question. So Judge Haskins, what do you value most of a CASA? And you might have answered this sort of as well, but just what do you value most if you were to give kind of like one kind of tidbit or words of wisdom of something? What would you say?
I would say a CASA who takes their appointment seriously and is able to devote enough time to, like Judge Much said, be the voice of the youth. Like I've also had a case where a CASA brought things to light that DFS kind of swept under the rug or wasn't, DFS has a high caseload, right? They have a lot of cases. And so I think the way the CASA program is structured is most volunteers only have 1 or 2 cases. And so that is invaluable because you can just focus on that youth. So I would say CASAs who take their appointment very serious and are devoted to improving the lives of these youth and helping me make a decision about whether a youth can go home. I'm a big believer in family. So if the parents can't take the child, I want CASAs to help me find family. Oftentimes a mom or dad will say, well, no one will take them. They're just talking. So I want CASAs to be digging up relatives and talking to the youth if they're old enough and helping this youth get to a place or in an environment where they're loved and supported and they can go off and be productive adults. So that's what I would say, to take it very seriously.
Awesome. Thank you. Judge Jones, same question to you. What do you value most about a CASA?
I value most when the CASA comes to court with and indicates to everyone that they have done their homework. They've talked to teachers. They've maybe even talked to a counselor. They've talked to the parents. They've talked to the foster parents. They have a lot of information, and it's not like, yes, I met with, or obviously they've talked to the child, but it's not like, yes, I met with the child this morning, and that was the first time in the last 2 months. So prepared with information that the court is going to need, and the information is current.
Great, thank you. Judge Vari, same question to you. What do you value most about a CASA?
When they share their homework with me. And I worry and I hope, and I'm speaking now to the gallery, if there's anything we can do to get you more comfortable actually sharing those opinions, if there's something I personally can do to make you more comfortable. I'm always disappointed when I know a CASA has information, but when the time comes to testify, it doesn't happen. And sometimes there are perfectly good reasons for that. But I really do want to hear it from you. And I think that can be an incredibly difficult thing to do, particularly when you have to deliver kind of news that people don't want to hear in the courtroom. But I really appreciate that when you're willing to take that oath and get on the stand and tell me what's really going on.
Awesome. Thank you. And Judge Much, same question to you. What do you value most about a CASA?
It, I agree with Judge Vari, is their input. I always, I do these swearing ins for CASAs at this point, and I tell them it's just so important that that you're going to be working with a child attorney, but if there is something that you need to say, if you feel that it's something important that needs to be before the court, and if the attorney can't get it in any other way by either questioning, any of the other witnesses that are on the stand or whatever, then I think you should push the attorney to put you on the stand if you're so inclined, because we really do value your opinion. You are out there in the real world, looking at everything involving this child, and it's just so important for us to have your insight into this child and what needs to happen. So
Wonderful. Thank
Can
you.
I add something, Lauren? So sometimes in my hearings, if I have 1 hour, I feel like DFS will take 45 minutes,
yeah.
right?
Right.
And then we're struggling with like 10 minutes left.
Right.
So I think that child attorneys I would not mind them telling me at the outset that they intend to call the CASA.
Right.
Then I know to kind of make sure I'm reserving time for that, because that's kind of the way we go. Sometimes if we run too short, I'll say, okay, CASA, next time you can go first, or, parent attorney, you can go first, because DFS tends to suck up all the time. And I understand that it's their burden, but I think we run out of time, and I don't want the CASAs to have different judges who have different approaches and feel like the judge doesn't want to hear from me or the judge is ready to move on. We just have very tight time frames. So I think knowing that in terms of an opening even would be helpful. And if a judge doesn't let you call the CASA, that's something you can talk to somebody else about. But at least if that is told to the judge at the outset, that'd be helpful in budgeting time.
Awesome. That's a great idea. All right. So I'm going to start kind of going through some of the questions that are in the chat. So the first question, and I think I'll stay in the same. Actually, how about we do this? I'll just say whichever judge wants to respond first. How about that? That way it's not in the same order necessarily. But sort of our first question is, how are you able, as a judge, how are you able to differentiate a party's perception from facts when they're working through a case? So what I imagine that means is really like what's fact from perception, what families think might be happening versus what's actually happening. What tips do you have to use when working through similar conversations to do the same?
I'm gonna let Judge Jones go first. Since
I'm not sure I understand.
So this is Sherry's question. Sherry, would it be easier if you unmuted and just asked your question? I don't want to butcher your question. I apologize.
Sure. My question is when a child or a parent is telling us about what they happen, they're saying it through their lens, their perspective, and we often get conflicting stories. Are there any tips that you would share with CASAs on ways that we can direct the questions or other things that we can do to help pull out the facts rather than, kind of sitting in the middle of two stories and trying to figure out the truth? What tips do you have for that?
Well, I guess we do that every single day in the courtroom when you hear conflicting stories. I had a hearing yesterday afternoon where mom and dad were telling me totally opposite things, and I was sitting there wondering, wait a minute. So I think what I would do in a courtroom is I would ask questions and try to see if wait a minute, you're saying this, how could that be possible? And maybe poke holes in what they're saying a little bit to get to the truth. And but obviously that's a difficult situation, and especially if they're coming at facts through a different lens.
I know when I was a PD, I would have teenage clients and they would tell me one story and the police report would be completely different. And I would kind of say, I would summarize what they were saying. And I would say, so can you understand how someone would think X based on what you said? Like you said, you were, at the store at the time of the robbery, but then when the robbery started, you left. But like the video camera shows you were there. So can you see how someone could think you were involved? that's how I would approach it. I would like literally try to say, well, can you understand maybe their perspective? I mean, that's when you're working with your youth, because you'll often, and we hear like youth will come on, they're railing about their foster parents, saying all this stuff. Well, they didn't let me do this, but they don't tell you, oh yeah, but I was out at 2 in the morning, or oh, I was out with my 25-year-old boyfriend. Like they leave that out. And so what I don't really do, I don't really challenge them too much, because that's not really my role. But I'll say, well, you can see how someone would be upset if you're coming home at 2 in the morning. So I just kind of use that as a way to flip it. Because if I feel if I challenge them, I will hold them accountable. But if I challenge them too much, they're going to shut down and they're going to stop coming to court. And there's a lot of other people that are challenging them, teachers, workers. So I kind of take them for what they're saying, but try to explain to them the other side and why someone may think that, and maybe in the future how we could avoid that.
Thank you.
So I think I would add details. I think that's what lawyers and courts live by. So who, what, where, when, and why type details. So, people have told me your mom never had any food in the house. Did she ever have anything there? Was it something you liked? Was it something else? Just that kind of pushing down on very simple stuff. And then I absolutely agree with Judge Haskins, perspective taking questions. So I think you learn a lot when you ask, okay, mom, you're telling me that you never yelled at your child. He says that sometimes you did. Can you tell me why you think he may have said that to me? And that's a subtle difference than saying you're lying, right? But it really gives a good indication about how much of perspective, what type of perspective each person's bringing to it, and the reasonableness of that perspective. The response does.
Awesome. Judge Much, any additional thoughts?
No, I kind of would mirror what Judge Haskins and Judge Vari have said. It's all in the perspective, and you're right. You don't want to come off as telling anybody, you're lying, that person's telling the truth or whatever. It's just all a matter of perspective. People who come into our courtroom perceive things totally differently, just like Judge Jones said, and they will tell you that something happened, that A happened, and the other person will say that B happened. So I think it's more about trying to figure out what the perspectives are to see if they couldn't be open to understanding the other person's perspective about what they feel occurred or whatever.
Awesome. Makes sense. So kind of going back, our next question is about the photo. And this is such a great idea because it's something that's, not that difficult to accomplish, but timing. So as judges, do you prefer a particular time frame, meaning like earlier, if there's a particular hearing that you would prefer to receive a photo earlier in the case versus later? And then how is it best to present it to you? Should it be presented from the child attorney or how so? So thinking about that photo, when is the best time?
So,
Okay, go ahead.
go ahead, Judge Vari.
I would think at the once you get through the adjudicatory and you've made that finding, then I think once you get to the dispositional, I would hate to have them feel like they have to get a photo and then the court. I mean, they could do it at any time, but I think you're more entrenched once you get to that dispositional hearing. There have been findings and we are now in it. So for me, I think the photo at the dispositional would be a great idea.
So I'm happy to have it as soon as possible, but that might just be because I like looking at pictures too. But then secondly, the preferred way to me would be to have everyone agree, mom, dad, CASA and child attorney and DFS agree. Hey, judge, here's a nice picture. That's the best way.
Right.
I don't always have a printed picture. Sometimes I just look at someone's phone because everyone can have their phone now. But I can tell you when I had a case, it was abused twins, and DFS showed me photos of them, right, initially. And that was very impactful to see not just their marks, but I saw like their little faces. And so that was early on in the case when I had to make a decision. So like Judge Vari is saying, it can come in many ways. I just need to know who I'm presiding over if the child's not there. That's it. So to me, it doesn't have to be super formal. It could be an actual photo. I can tell you, CASA, not every judge is going to want to see a picture. So I'd hate for you guys to have this picture, and some judges are like, I don't want that. So I am just saying, I'm one of the judges. Any of us on here want to see a picture? You could always have the child attorney ask, "Hey, judge, are you interested in seeing a picture of little Johnny?" And if the judge says sure, then maybe you have it. But I'm not. I know all my colleagues, and I don't know if all of them would just be like, "Yeah, let me see that picture." I would hope they wouldn't say no, but I'm just warning you. We all do, and that's something else. Everyone does cases a little bit different. But generally, I think if the child attorney asks, that's how I would do it.
Awesome. Thank you. I think everybody answered that one.
Judge Jones did go.
Oh,
I don't
Judge
have
Jim.
anything. I don't know. The DAG usually at the beginning says, and judge, here we have photos. It might be at the PPH, it might be at the judiciary, and then often as the case goes on, they have updated photos. So it's just, yeah, it's whenever.
Wonderful. Thank you. We've got a couple other comments. So I'm going to go. I think our next question is, how do you keep yourself unbiased? Meaning not pro mom, pro dad, pro anybody else. How do you kind of stay objective and kind of unbiased as you work these, as you are listening to evidence and information about these cases?
I can say it's hard. Like Judge Vari was saying, it's hard when that case, that abuse case, and all of us on this call have family, children, grandchildren. I don't have grandchildren, but some people have grandchildren. And so when you hear of a case of a child being hurt like the same age as your child, or it could sometimes make you, supplant your relative for that person. You have to be very careful. So what I try to do is come from a fairness perspective, right? And remember that these parents who are usually accused of doing these things are better than their worst day. There's got to be more positives to them than this negative. Was this a one-off? Was this something that is, they had a bad day, they're struggling with poverty and other things, and this happened? But just trying to make sure the process is fair. I think if I can keep that in my brain, that my job is to make sure that it's fair. And so if they've got a zealous advocate and I've got a DAG on the other side and I've got a child attorney in CASA and everybody's interests are represented, that's the best I can ask for. But we are human, and we have to learn techniques of when we get overwhelmed, of stepping off the bench, taking a break. I like to go get coffee at 10:30. And my notices I take a break at 10:30. I'm getting coffee or a banana. But those are just techniques that we have to use to keep ourselves grounded, because this is tough work and we're not robots. But I think if we approach it from fairness perspective, it will help us remember that that's the goal of the process, in my opinion.
So we've actually received training from the court on this. And one of the things I learned from that was, number one, recognizing your tendency to be biased in this direction or that direction. That's a critical thing. The other thing that's really helped me is something Judge Haskins just checked on. So you can generally be unbiased. You can know what your biases are, think you've got them under wraps. But when it's the fifth hearing of the day and you've heard horrible things in the first four, that can go out the window in a hurry. I shared that one of my jobs before being a judge was as a commissioner, and that is also a really demanding, very busy job where you hear lots about abuse. And one of the little techniques I developed when I was doing that was, every day when I walk into the courtroom, I stop outside the door for at least 3 or 4 seconds and do this kind of mental thing where I try to wipe my slate of everything that happened up till then. And that's just a small technique that, because no matter how well-intentioned you are about being unbiased, if the emotional pressures build up, you're probably not going to be successful.
One thing I try to remember is when you walk in that courtroom, it's like it's in the middle of the football game and the score is DFS 30 and the parents 0. And because DFS has all the power. Okay, I was at a training once, and because they're the state of Delaware, and the state of Delaware has all the power at the beginning of the case. Look at all the resources the state of Delaware has. And I remember we were at a training once for DFS workers, and a DFS worker said, "Why do we always feel like we're on the defensive? Why do we have to answer all the hard questions?" Well, because you're the state of Delaware and you took a child out of the home with the permission of a judge, but that's the way it is. It's no different than in a criminal case, the police officer is up there testifying because they are the state of Delaware and they have to expect that they're going to get the tough questions. So, I don't know. Certainly things happen as the case go on that you're thinking, oh, brother, I can't believe that mom did that or dad did that, or wow, are they ever going to get their child back? But, it's not over till it's over. And these parents do, as we've all seen, some of them make incredible changes in their lives that you can return the children to them at the end of the case. And that's great. So I don't know. I just keep thinking to myself, okay, we're not at the end yet. So we just have to see how things go.
So yeah, it's everybody has their own biases, and it doesn't matter whether you like a litigant or don't like a litigant, whether it's DFS or any other case. To me, it's just I just kind of have to put blinders on and look at the evidence, and I try to just be as emotionless when it comes to that's my job, is to look at everything that's being presented to the court and make a decision in that regard, no matter what I feel about one litigant or another litigant, or I thinking, oh no, here comes mother again and she looks even worse than she did, at the last hearing or whatever. It's got to be based upon what the testimony and evidence is that is being presented at that hearing. So.
Awesome. And I think that finishes our questions here, actually. So I think I'll kind of wrap it up with sort of final words of wisdom from each judge. If you could kind of, and you've kind of all answered this in different, as a result of other questions, but thinking of if you could have a perfect CASA situation, like what's some final kind of tips or words of wisdom of ways that CASAs can best advocate for their children that they're appointed to?
Don't be afraid to speak up, either to your lawyer, the child attorney. Don't feel like anything that you're going to say, if you have a conviction about what is happening with the child, or based upon information that I really just want you to let somebody know. Let the child attorney know, and if he wants to put you on the witness stand, then so be it. But to me, that is I think that is the most important thing you can do as a CASA.
I was going to say, so when I was a child attorney and I was in Kent County in front of a judge, it wasn't Judge Vari. And I had this great case, I thought. Like I had went and listened to all these prison recordings of the mom and her boyfriend, who was alleged to have fractured the child's femur bone. And Miss Clancy was in on that. And we worked hard. We listened to hours of prison, or maybe you did, prison recordings. And we were going to present that to the judge. We were so excited. And I remember trying to present it and the judge just not even really caring that much. And it was kind of like, we did all this work and, investigation. And I feel like the judge is not really, and there could have been a lot of reasons why I felt that. But I felt in that moment like all that hard work and the judge didn't care. So if you get that response and you perceive that from a hearing officer or judge, don't be dissuaded. Keep fighting, keep investigating. Like Judge Much said, keep advocating, and don't let some judges are crankier than others. Don't let that dissuade you from advocating for your client. And just keep bringing that to the judge's attention and putting it on the record whenever you can. So that's what I would advise.
So I think when we become judges and commissioners, we have to be interviewed by a lot of different people, committees, the governor and the like. And every one of those interviews I've ever had, I have been asked, what do you think about the CASAs? And everyone, when I answer and say what I think, which is what I've said today, they always say, yep, we agree. And I learned from that you guys matter and everybody recognizes your importance. And that's what I would kind of encourage you to feel your power.
And I guess in response to something that was said earlier about sometimes you're ready to testify and you're not called to testify. Well, I mean, that's part of litigation. The attorney is always going to be evaluated. Do I really need the testimony from the CASA? Do we have time? Is it going to have any impact on the case? So what you came to court to say is probably very important, but don't be offended if you're not called to testify, because the attorney has made a determination, well, it's not going to really change things today. Yeah, your job is very important. I'm thrilled when I get to swear in new CASAs and get to ask them what they do in life or what they have done if they're retired. And it's very interesting where CASAs come from. So you are a very important part of the process, and I love having you there in these cases. I wish we could appoint CASAs, though, in private custody cases. I'd like to start doing that. Lauren, when can we start doing that?
That's a great question. That was actually one of my first cases when I became a CASA coordinator, was private cases, because we used to have them a lot. But yeah, now we don't either. I'd have to defer to the uppers.
They don't like to do that.
I think, and I don't mean to speak out of turn, but I think it might be just not having enough CASAs to serve all DFS, dependency neglect cases, and private cases, but maybe there's more to it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I want to make sure, did all judges give kind of a final words of advice? Okay, I think so. Awesome. Any final questions from any CASA volunteers at all? Otherwise, all right. Well, thank you, for judges. I really appreciate your time for this, and CASA volunteers who attended, thank you very much as well. It's always great to have a little bit of FaceTime with judges and really hear directly from you all what's helpful, what's valuable, what's not helpful, and then how can we be more helpful both in and out of court hearings. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it.